Let's start with Yousif in Iraq, calling in from a while
Oh,
far away. Hi,
hello.
Yousif. Can you hear us?
Oh, hey, how are you guys doing?
Doing really good. What can we help you with today?
Well, first I just want to say I really love your videos. You too, Thomas. Just love your show.
Oh, thank
Well,
you.
not at least channel. Uh, so I just wanted to speak about the cosmological argument.
Yeah.
Mainly one part of it, maybe two. The infinite regress part. I kind of wanted to ask what is the opinion of let's say philosophers on the infinite regress? Is it impossible? Or I read something like it doesn't have explanatory power, which okay, that makes sense. Like it just doesn't really explain anything. And second question is why not just say that the Big Bang is the first cause? Like why not just leave it at that, you know?
Right. No, exactly. So I want to preface this by saying I'm not an actual philosopher. I like to talk about philosophy, and I don't want to gatekeep the term, but there are probably areas and aspects of this that I'm not going to touch on simply because I'm not aware of them. So if the people
Yeah,
watching
understandable.
this are, more well versed in this or have an additional thing to add, please leave it as a comment. We'll talk about it next week. But Yousif, I think you're spot on there on both counts. So the first one, yes, infinite regress is a quandary. It's a conundrum. It's one of those things that doesn't quite make sense. But it's kind of the same issue that we have when we talk about the laws of logic, right? And there is a kind of circularity there as well that we need to just kind of accept. Right. We need to kind of just accept that the laws of logic are true because they are. It's a tautology, but we have broken away everything except for that. And so we can all kind of agree that that's a good starting place, right? Is it circular? Yeah, kind of. But we can't really escape that without going into hard solipsism and saying, well, nothing exists and we're just a brain in a vat.
Where it ends up. It's
exactly.
Like, oh, how can you be sure of that? And the thing is, it's just not possible to answer that. Like, how do I convince someone? Because my second point with the why not the Big Bang as the first cause, like that one is technically actually answering it. Like that's actually saying, okay, even following the argument,
right,
this should be the case. Like well, not should be, but it could be simply just the answer. Like why not this? You know?
Right. And that to me is the downfall of all cosmological arguments, all forms of them, is essentially more than anything, they're just linguistic in nature, right?
I'd have to agree.
We define God as something that existed before everything else. Therefore, God must exist because something must have existed before anything else.
There's the concept of a necessary being or something like that. I hear that all the time.
Yes, the modal ontological argument is a mind bender. Eric and I spent 24 straight hours talking about it and got to the point where we were like, this is just circular reasoning and linguistic, playground, essentially.
Fair enough. It's just how do I convince someone else of that? I mean, because I always have the idea of okay, what if I'm the one that just doesn't get it? But at the same time, I kind of thought about it a lot. I don't know. I mean, I try to look it up and stuff, and you never get a conclusive answer, you know?
Yeah.
Well, this is what kind of frustrates me with the realm of philosophy, and where I'll probably differ from both of you guys, is that are you familiar? Have you read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
Oh yeah. I haven't read it, but I kind of know some.
They talk about the Babelfish, and they say that the Babelfish is, there's this whole loop that they go through about how the Babelfish is proof of the existence of God, but then God requires faith in order for him to exist. Because God requires faith, and now here's evidence, then God can't be real, and so poof, God is reasoned out of existence. And it's this really kind of backward, convoluted argument, but it's reasoning God out of existence. It kind of pokes fun at how philosophers will find all of these ways to reason things into existence. And science comes at it from a very different approach. Science says, can we demonstrate it? Can we observe it? Can we test it in one way, shape, or form? And when it comes to, you go back to the origin of the universe, there's certain signs that, we can say certain things about what the early universe looked like right after the Big Bang. And we can, we're literally looking back in time because, you know, light travels at a fixed speed. So things that come, you know, to us from further away come to us from further back in time. And so you can actually kind of peek back in time and take measurements of what it was like in the early universe. And, you know, scientists have done this, you know, looking at the cosmic microwave background radiation. But anything kind of beyond that point, there's a point in time where like we just can't,
Like we just don't know.
we can't go any further. And it's a point in time where, like, let's say that things were, you know, super densely packed together. It reaches a point where it's impossible for us to recreate. So you can you know, test things mathematically, and you can say, okay, given our current models, what does
recreate in what sense?
Well, like you can make mathematical models, but eventually they break down, or eventually you're not sure if it would apply in a certain scenario because you're unable to test it. And so what scientists will do when they get that far back, you know, in time, they say, beyond this point, we don't know. There's certain models that maybe we could build these elaborate tests and maybe they're falsifiable and maybe we'll never know. And so you hit kind of a brick wall where it's like you continue to explore and test and stuff, but we may not know. And it's okay being comfortable with saying, like, we know that the universe is here. We know that we live here in this universe. We don't have demonstrable proof of the existence of God, or at least the interaction with some type of God or supernatural forces. So it's hard for us to say anything definitively on that. But we know that this universe exists, and there's multiple models that are put forth as to how the universe started. There's cyclical models. There's, you know, models that say that time started at the Big Bang. There's all kinds of models. We don't know which one is right, but to say that because scientists don't know for sure that therefore God must exist, it's like, where are religious people getting this certainty from? Like, you can't just reason it into existence through philosophical syllogisms.
Yeah, I mean,
but
it's also like you said at one point. You said like time, something like that begins after. The thing is, like, people say something like God is outside of time, and it's like, what? What does that even mean?
yeah.
Oh my
like,
goodness.
Like, I always think, like, why aren't all physicists, or not even all, like the majority or whatever, at least deists, you know, like, or like religious in any sense? It's just like, I don't know, the time thing. He's outside of time.
If he's outside of time and he's not affected by time, is he just like frozen and he can't like move because there's no cause and effect?
Well, the weirdest mind trippy thing that you can do, if you're interested in this line of thought, is listen to William Lane Craig talk about the different theories of time that theologians have and philosophers have, that is completely kind of like divorced from anything scientific. They're like, the A theory of time and the B theory of time. It's like,
Yeah, I don't think I heard it.
How many scientists have you run that by?
I heard it.
Well,
yeah, I don't know. I've never heard him speak about that.
Yeah.
You know, it could be that we're living in some simulation, right? And in that sense, in that framework, we would, like, our time, like, you think of you're playing a video game, like the time in the game is different from the time of the person playing the game. So in that sense, the person could be outside of the simulation. And so it's like there are models that you can come up with that make sense and they might work. But the question is, like, is there evidence for it? Is there proof of it? Is there a way to demonstrate it? Can you actually make a statement about the moral character of the person playing the simulation or creating the simulation? How do you know that there's only one and that there's not a whole society of programmers? Like,
that's kind of the same as when people are talking about the first cause, the way it's framed is basically like, okay, we have this problem, infinite regress. Let's just plug in first cause, and that's it. You know, what is this first cause? What is, like, for example, I was speaking with this friend of mine. I was telling him, like, okay, why not the Big Bang as the first cause? And then he asked me, okay, well, what would set it off? And it's like, what? Now I need something to set it off. And it's just like, okay, why not just add that to it? Like, why not just say, okay, well, one property of the Big Bang is that it would set itself off. And the problem is that I don't know what I'm talking about. This is basically advanced physics at this point.
Right, exactly.
I mean, I guess I could, it's just, I don't know, what am I talking about? Because it's all just philosophy. Like, it doesn't actually, I'm not speaking with a scientist, and I'm not a scientist myself, so I don't know.
Exactly. And that, I think, is the
difficult to think
biggest
about.
thing to take away from cosmological arguments specifically. Also, teleological fine-tuning type arguments. We can make a perfect syllogism about a hypothetical world where things exist, and that really has no bearing on whether or not it's actually true, right? So even if we were to grant that cosmological arguments were valid and sound, which they're not, we still would really only have a hypothetical situation that could be, but we can't use that to make the determination that things are. So when you're talking about things like cosmology, the beginning of everything, the universe, space-time, evolution, all of this, these are very specific fields of science that take years and years and years and years of study to actually understand at all. So to pretend that you can just be like, well, infinite regress, therefore God, is very hubristic, right? It's very full of yourself to think that you could just figure that out, and that somehow all of the scientists in the world have not yet.
Yeah, I feel like it also, they're like, you're either choosing to delete infinite regress or to delete everything has a cause. You either say everything has a cause, or you say that infinite regress is, so like, you're saying everything has a cause except for the first cause, but that you're only doing that just to get rid of the infinite regress. But you're still contradicting the everything has a cause thing. And
right.
It's like, I don't know, like, how do you do that? How do you do that at the same time?
And then how do you get from that, even if we are to grant the idea of a first cause, how do you get from first cause to any kind of particular God? Like, that leap is impossible. I have seen so many apologists try and make the leap between random first cause to the God that I choose that it is, and it's impossible to do.
I feel like theists see it as basically that atheism to deism is a much bigger jump than deism to theism.
Yeah.
But no, it's either the same size of a jump, because you still have zero evidence towards the theism. So just getting to deism is you might as well just not do it. It's a waste of time. It's like saying, let's say there was a murder scene, and not a murder scene, like a corpse. You see a corpse and you think, okay, well, there must have been a murderer. It's like, okay, who is this guy? Who is the murderer? Like, you didn't get anywhere. You're just saying, well, there must have been one. It doesn't really get anywhere, at least in my opinion.
That's assuming that there was that someone was murdered and that they didn't die a natural cause.
Exactly.
Like, Yousif, do you know how stars are formed?
Not 100%, no.
So basically, what happened? Like for a long time growing up, I didn't, for the life of me, I could not tell you how stars are formed, and I thought that they were all just created by God 6,000 years ago, and that was that. And then I started learning a little bit about cosmology, and I'm not an astrophysicist, but I know that you can look out into a nebula where there's just clouds of gas out there in the cosmos. And you can see that there's areas of these gas clouds that are denser than others. There's more matter, there's more atoms and stuff.
Okay.
And the more matter that there is, the more that there's a gravitational pull, right? Just like, there's a stronger gravitational pull between you and the Earth than like you and a car, but there's still a gravitational pull between all of it. As you have tons and tons of matter, it starts forming together and coalescing. And as it becomes denser and denser and denser, you have so much pressure that builds up that the pressure causes heat, and eventually this gas ignites and you have a star that's born. And that's our sun. That's all the stars in the universe. That's how they came about, that there was just a cluster. A
lot of pressure just caused heat. And
that's all that you need is gravity, time, and matter. Those are the only three things that you need to form a star. And so you can have those stars form naturally on their own. And after a while, like those stars, they start burning up their fuel. And inside the center of the stars, you have elements fusing together into more, denser and denser elements. That's how everything in the universe, it's not just hydrogen. You have, things around you like lead and stuff that are like much denser elements, that they have more protons and neutrons in them because these simple elements have undergone nuclear fusion to form denser elements. That's all a natural process.
I may have lost you there. Wait, could you repeat that part?
Well, what I was saying is you have denser elements like lead that, they started off in the hearts of...
You mean like it's denser than, let's say, hydrogen?
Yes, like hydrogen has like one proton, right?
Yeah.
One proton, and like... I think there's different isotopes of hydrogen. I'm not a chemist, but
there's only 3, I think. But Yeah, anyway.
Yeah, but if you take that and you're like, okay, so that we know that we can go from really simple elements to more complex ones, and it doesn't require any kind of interaction from any outside forces. All you need is matter, time, and gravity. And we know that those three things exist in our universe. We see it happening all the time. You can point your telescope up in the sky, and if you have a high enough powered telescope, you can observe these things happening. You can use spectrographs to tell exactly what elements are in different stars. And like you can see all of this happening. Now, if that star burns up enough of its fuel, it explodes outward. And it explodes its guts out into the cosmos. That's where the Earth came from. That's where asteroids come from. That's where all of these heavier element clumps of matter came from, was the hearts of stars. And so we see this process, and then they can form together and form new stars. And like we see it happening again and again. But to say like, well, that star began to exist, you know, who caused it? It's like, well, it didn't need a who. Well, it started at some point. It's like, well, it didn't start from nothing. All of the pre-existing...
They kind of go all the way, they kind of just go all the way back as much as possible. Like, okay, even if you answer the hydrogen, obviously, they can just go back. Like, where did the hydrogen come from?
Well yeah, but
God,
even
man,
if,
it's God, bro.
But even if you get to like the start of those stars, it's like, well, all of the elements that were required, they were already there. Like, we don't know if they've always been there. We don't know if the universe is infinite. This whole idea of like a first cause going back to the Big Bang, it's like, okay, so you go back to the furthest back we can look in time. We still don't know if the universe was infinite. We don't know if, there's multiple universes. We don't know if our universe is formed out of a black hole. We don't know if there's, a multiverse theory. We don't know if there's, some Big Bang, Big Crunch type of model. Like, some of these models are ruled out. Some of them aren't. There's like multiple in physics that are all competing. But like this idea that there has to be a first cause and that it all came into existence from nothing. It's like, well, what do you mean nothing? Like, can you demonstrate the existence of absolute nothing? Can you show that the universe, a point in time when it didn't exist?
I feel like if whoever like makes this type of argument, like back in school, one time, I don't know if it was, I think Thoth, the Egyptian god of writing, for instance, something like that. Apparently he birthed himself from words, like words gave birth to him. And it's like, you look at that and most people just say, okay, that's ridiculous. But when it comes to like coming from nothing or always existing, that's somehow just okay, it's fine. I don't know how, I don't know, like I don't see
it's special
how
pleading.
People don't see the problem with that. Yeah, I mean, I guess it just has to be like.
Yeah, it is. And the other problem with it here is that false dichotomy, right? Like Thomas was saying, there are multiple theories about how all of this got started, right? It's not as simple as either infinite regress or God.
One more thing. It's like, what counts as a cause? Like, can one thing be caused from two things, for instance? Like, let's say a birth has to come from a mother and a father, like a sperm and an egg, let's just say. Is that two causes or is that one? You know what I mean?
Right. The second you start getting into the semantics of it is the second it breaks down. And that's why people try to keep running with it, right? If you were to listen to, again, William Lane Craig try and talk about the cosmological argument, he just runs with it, right? He starts, and as soon as he hits a possible question, he just goes, because if you stay on the question,
I get what you mean.
And if you keep asking questions, why use this word? What does this mean? Are there other uses for this word? Is this the only other option? Then they never get away with the rest of the script. Yousif, thank you so much for calling in.
Sure. All right, thanks for having me. Your show is just amazing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
All right, bye.
That was a fun call.
That was a fun call. I was just like so happy to see you just going for it with all that. That was awesome.
Well, that was one of the things for me that, like, in my transition out of theism, while I was still a Christian, I started learning about like where all this stuff comes from. And it's not just like evolution and where did, an abiogenesis and where did life come from and how did it get here and stuff. Like, there's so many things about our universe that, like, to me, there was just a void. And in my brain, God was very much a God of the gaps, where it was like these things, because I couldn't explain them, I had to pin it on God. Now, that wasn't the only reason I believed in God, but as soon as all of those voids started getting plugged up with really sound, demonstrable descriptions of how the universe actually works, I was like, oh my God, that makes sense. And if all of those things, all the pieces of the puzzle are coming together, why do I need God to explain the one that like is just we don't know? And how can I say with certainty that we demonstrably, definitively know that God exists for that gap when no one has that kind of certainty?
Exactly.
At the very least, we can say just like, I don't know, like I'm agnostic on how the universe got started.